She stood in the rain with her baby pressed against her chest. The orphanage doors slammed shut in her face. No money, no family, no roof. Just whispers that followed her like shadows. Widow, scandal, unfit. The city had already decided she didn't deserve to survive. But Eliza Thornfield had one rule left, and it wasn't mercy. It was this: I will not disappear. What she didn't know was that someone was watching, someone powerful, someone with secrets just as dangerous as hers. This is a story about two people society wanted erased, and the ruthless bargain that changed everything. Stay with me till the end. Hit like, and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain didn't stop in November. It soaked through wool, turned cobblestones into mirrors, and made the whole city smell like rust and smoke. Eliza Thornfield stood under the stone archway of St. Callum's orphanage, her shawl heavy with water, her arms wrapped tight around the bundle against her chest. Inside the shawl, her son, 3 months old, still unnamed on any registry, slept with the kind of trust only infants had, the kind that didn't know the world yet. She knocked again, harder this time. The door cracked open. A woman's face appeared in the gap, pale and pinched, eyes narrowed like she was squinting at something distasteful. "We're full," the woman said. "I only need a corner," Eliza said. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled against the baby's back. "Just for the night. I can work. I can clean, or we don't take in strays. I'm not a stray, I'm a mother." The woman's mouth thinned. "We know who you are, Mrs. Thornfield." She said the title like it was spoiled fruit. "We know what you did." Eliza's jaw tightened. "I didn't do anything." "That's not what people say." "People say a lot of things." The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice to something that might have passed for pity if it wasn't so laced with contempt. "Listen, I don't care if the stories are true or not, but this is a Christian house. We can't have your kind here. It sets a bad example." Eliza felt the heat rise in her throat. She swallowed it down. "My kind. You understand?" "I don't." The woman sighed, like Eliza was being deliberately difficult. "Look, there's a workhouse on Marsh Street. They might take you. Or there's always the docks. Some of the taverns there let women sleep in the back if they're accommodating." Eliza stared at her. The rain dripped off the edge of the archway, splashing onto her boots. Inside the orphanage, she could hear children singing, hymns probably, safe and warm and fed. "Thank you," Eliza said quietly, "for nothing." She turned and walked back into the rain. The workhouse on Marsh Street didn't take her either. Neither did the boarding house on Creole Lane or the charity shelter near the docks. By the time the sky started to darken, Eliza had stopped asking. She found a doorway near a shuttered tailor's shop, tucked herself into the corner, and pulled her shawl tighter around the baby. He stirred, whimpering softly, and she rocked him without thinking. Her body knew the rhythm even when her mind had gone numb. She wasn't cold yet. That would come later. A man walked past, middle-aged, well-dressed, umbrella in hand. He glanced at her, then looked away quickly, like she was something indecent. A woman in a fine coat hurried by on the other side of the street, pulling her daughter closer as they passed. Eliza watched them go. She didn't blame them. She understood the rules. If you were poor, you were invisible. If you were a woman alone, you were suspect. If you were both, you were dangerous. And if you'd buried your husband under a cloud of ugly rumors, well, you were something worse than dangerous. You were scandalous. David Thornfield had been a clerk. Not a good one, but not a bad one either. He'd worked for a shipping company, kept their books, came home every night smelling like ink and cheap tobacco. They'd married young, too young, Eliza thought now, but it had seemed like the right thing at the time. He was steady, quiet, safe. Then he'd gotten sick. It started with a cough, then a fever. Then he couldn't get out of bed. The doctor said it was consumption, but the medicine cost more than they had, and David refused to let her sell anything. "We'll manage," he kept saying, even as his skin turned gray and his breath came in rattles. "We'll be fine." He died 3 weeks before the baby was born, and that's when the rumors started. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe one of David's co-workers, suggested that Eliza had been careless with his care, that she'd let him suffer, that maybe she'd even wanted him gone. After all, wasn't it convenient? A young widow with a baby on the way, free to do as she pleased? It didn't matter that none of it was true. It didn't matter that she'd sat by his bedside every night, wiping the sweat from his forehead, whispering promises she couldn't keep. People liked a good story. And a woman who didn't cry loud enough at a funeral was always guilty of something. So when she couldn't pay the rent, the landlord told her to leave. When she went to David's employer for the wages owed, they said there was nothing left. When she asked the church for help, they suggested she pray harder. And now here she was, invisible, suspect, dangerous, but not gone. Not yet. Us say, she must have dozed off, because when she opened her eyes, the street was darker and the rain had stopped. The baby was crying, a thin, reedy sound that cut through the quiet. She shifted, trying to adjust him, but her arms were stiff and her back ached from the cold stone. "Shh," she whispered. "Shh, I know. He didn't stop. She fumbled with her shawl, trying to nurse him, but he turned his head away, fussing. He was hungry, but not for what she had. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, a half slice of bread she'd found in her pocket, stale and hard. Her milk was thin. She could feel it. Panic started to creep in, slow and cold. He needs food. Real food. I need to find something. She stood, legs shaking, and started walking. She didn't know where. Just away. Away from the doorway, away from the stairs, away from the weight pressing down on her chest. The streets were emptier now. Gas lamps flickered on corners, casting long shadows. A few carriages rattled past, their drivers hunched against the wind. Eliza kept her head down, her arms tight around the baby. She passed a tavern, loud voices, the smell of stew, and her stomach twisted. She kept walking. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't turn around, just walked faster. The footsteps matched her pace. Her heart kicked up. She glanced over her shoulder, just a quick look, and saw a man. Tall, coat pulled up around his collar, hat low. He wasn't close, but he wasn't far either. She turned a corner, the footsteps followed. "Don't run," she told herself. "Running makes you pray." But her legs wanted to. Her whole body wanted to. She turned another corner, ducking into an alley, narrow, dark, the kind of place her mother would have warned her about. The footsteps stopped. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath, the baby squirming against her. Silence. Then a voice. Low, calm, and far too close. "Mrs. Thornfield." She froze. The man stepped into the alley. The lamplight caught his face, sharp features, dark eyes, a jaw that looked like it had been carved out of something unforgiving. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old either, mid-30s maybe. Expensive coat, polished boots. Not someone who belonged in an alley. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. Eliza's hand went to the knife in her pocket, a small, dull thing she'd taken from the kitchen before she left the apartment. It wouldn't do much, but it was something. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone who's been watching." Her grip tightened on the knife. "That's not an answer." "No," he admitted. "It's not." He took a step closer. She pulled the knife out, holding it low, her hand shaking. He stopped, raised his hand slightly, palms out. "I'm not here to harm you," he said again. "I'm here to help. I don't need help. You're standing in an alley in the rain with an infant and a knife that couldn't cut butter. Yes, you do." She hated that he was right, hated the calm in his voice, the certainty, the way he looked at her like he already knew how this would end. "What do you want?" she asked. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his coat, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a small leather purse. He held it up so she could see, then tossed it gently onto the ground between them. It landed with a soft clink. "That's enough for a room," he said. "Food. Whatever you need for a few days." Eliza stared at the purse, then at him. "Why? Does it matter?" "Yes." He tilted his head slightly, like he was surprised by the answer. "Fair enough. Let's say I don't like seeing people suffer when it's preventable. Charity, then. If that's what you want to call it." She didn't move, didn't reach for the purse. "I don't take handouts," she said. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Then call it a loan." "I can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped back, deeper into the shadows. "Nothing," he said. "Not yet." And before she could say anything else, he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the night. Eliza stood there, the knife still in her hand, the purse on the ground. She waited until she was sure he was gone. Then she picked it up. The room she rented was small and damp, but it had a bed and a stove and a door that locked. She fed the baby with milk she bought from a street vendor, warmed it over the fire, watched him drink until he fell asleep in her arms. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the purse. There was more money inside than she'd expected. Enough for a week, maybe 2 if she was careful. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt uneasy. Who was he? Why did he know my name? What does he want? She didn't have answers. And that scared her more than the hunger, more than the cold, more than the locked doors. Because in her experience, men didn't help women for no reason. There was always a reason. The next day, she went looking for work. She tried the laundries first, hot, loud, full of women with red hands and bent backs. They told her they weren't hiring. She tried the factories next. Same answer. She tried a bakery, a seamstress, a house looking for a maid. Same answer every time. We're full. We don't need anyone. Try somewhere else. She knew what they weren't saying. We don't hire women like you. By the time she made it back to the boarding house, her feet were blistered and her head was pounding. The baby was fussing again, hungry again, and she had just enough milk left for 1 more bottle. She sat down on the bed and counted the money. 10 days left. Maybe 12. Then what? She didn't let herself think about it. That night she dreamed about David. He was standing in the doorway of their old apartment, pale and thin, his eyes hollow. He didn't say anything, just looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, disappointed maybe, or angry, or just tired. "I tried," she said. He didn't answer. "I did everything I could." Still nothing. Say something. But he just turned and walked away, and when she tried to follow, the door slammed shut. She woke up gasping, her heart racing, the baby crying beside her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling him close. I'm sorry. He stopped crying. She didn't. The man came back 3 days later. She was walking back from the market, 2 potatoes, a quarter loaf of bread, and an apple that was more bruised than fruit, when she saw him standing across the street. Same coat, same hat, same unreadable expression. This time, she didn't run. She crossed the street and stopped in front of him. "You're following me," she said. "Yes." "Why?" "I told you I'm helping." "I didn't ask for your help." "No, but you took the money." She felt her face flush. "I'll pay you back." "I told you I don't want it back." "Then what do you want?" He looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then he said, "I want to make sure you survive." "Why?" "Because you deserve to." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You don't know me." "I know enough." "No, you don't. You don't know what people say about me. You don't know what I am." "A widow with a child and no options," he said calmly. "A woman the world has decided to punish for the crime of existing. Yes, I know exactly what you are." She stared at him, her throat tight. "Who are you?" she asked again. This time he answered, "Alaric Vane." The name hit her like a stone. She took a step back, her eyes widening. "The Duke?" "Yes. Why?" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of it. A duke. A duke. Standing in the middle of the street, talking to her like she was someone who mattered. "Why are you doing this?" she managed. "Because I can," he said simply, "and because no one else will." She shook her head. "I don't understand." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. People like you don't just help people like me. There's always something, there's always a cost." His expression didn't change. "Maybe, but not today." He reached into his coat again and pulled out another purse, heavier this time. "This will last you a month," he said, holding it out. Maybe more. She didn't take it. I can't. Why not? Because I don't know what you want. I want you to survive. That's not an answer. He smiled then, small, sad, and far too knowing. No, it's not. He set the purse down on the low wall beside them, then stepped back. Take it or don't, he said. But if you don't, you'll be on the streets again by the end of the week, and I think you know that. Then he tipped his hat and walked away. Eliza stood there, staring at the purse. The baby made a soft sound in her arms. She looked down at him, his tiny face, his closed eyes, his hands curled into fists. He deserves better than this, she thought. Better than me. Better than all of it. She picked up the purse and hated herself for it. The whispers started 2 days later. She heard them in the market first, 2 women standing by the vegetable stall, talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw her, but not before she caught the words, Duke Vane, that widow. What's he thinking? Then she heard it at the boarding house. The landlady gave her a long, cold look when she paid the rent, her lips pressed into a thin line. You've got friends in high places, I see, the woman said. Eliza didn't answer. Just make sure they're the right kind of friends. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. Shopkeepers watched her with suspicion. Other tenants avoided her in the hallways. A woman spat at her feet as she passed. And she knew what they were saying. She's his mistress. She's using him. She's a whore. It didn't matter that none of it was true. It didn't matter that she'd never even spoken to him before a week ago. People didn't need truth. They just needed a story. And she was a good story. She went to find him. It took her 3 days to work up the nerve, but she finally tracked him down, not at his estate, but at a club on Grafton Street. The doorman tried to stop her, but she pushed past him, marching into the smoking room with the baby in her arms and fury in her chest. The room went silent. Alaric Vane was sitting by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand, talking to 2 other men in expensive suits. He looked up when she walked in, his expression shifting from surprise to something darker. Mrs. Thornfield, he said evenly. We need to talk, she said. One of the other men laughed. Well, this is irregular. Leave, Alaric said. The laughter stopped. I said leave. They left. When the door closed, Eliza took a breath and said, You need to stop. Stop what? Helping me. Watching me. Whatever it is you're doing, you need to stop. He set his glass down. Why? Because people are talking. People always talk. Not about me. Not like this. Then let them talk. She laughed, sharp, bitter. You don't understand. You can't. You're a duke. You can do whatever you want, and people will bow and scrape and call it eccentric. But I'm nobody, and when people talk about me, it destroys me. He stood, crossing the room in a few long strides. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're not nobody, he said quietly. Yes, I am. No, you're not. And that's the problem. She frowned. What? He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his expression. Then he said, I don't have an heir. She blinked. What? I'm 43 years old, no children, no wife, no heir. When I die, everything I've built dies with me. The estate, the title, the legacy, it all goes to some distant cousin I've never met. A man who'll sell it off piece by piece and scatter it to the wind. Eliza shook her head. What does this have to do with me? Everything. Her breath caught. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I've spent the last 10 years trying to fix it, looking for a wife, a proper one, someone suitable, someone the world would approve of. And I'm tired of waiting for someone who doesn't exist. He looked at her again, his gaze steady, unflinching. You need protection. I need an heir. It's a transaction, nothing more. She stared at him. You're insane. Probably. You're asking me to marry you. I'm proposing a marriage. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Yes, there is. One is about love, the other is about survival. She shook her head, stepping back. I won't do it. Why not? Because I'm not a commodity, I'm not something you can buy. I'm not buying you, I'm offering you a way out. No, you're offering me a cage with better bars. His jaw tightened. You'd rather stay here in the streets, watching your child starve? I'd rather keep my dignity. Dignity doesn't feed children. And selling myself does? It's not selling, it's surviving. She turned to leave. He caught her arm, not rough, but firm. Eliza. She froze. It was the first time he'd used her name. Listen to me, he said quietly. I know what you think this is. I know what it looks like. But I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to be grateful. I'm asking you to be smart. She pulled her arm free. I am being smart. Smart enough to know that men like you don't help women like me without a price. Then what's my price? I don't know yet, but I will. She walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Stay away from me, she said. Whatever game you're playing, I'm not part of it. And she left, shocked. But the money kept coming. Not from him, never directly. But there were envelopes slipped under her door, coins left on her windowsill, a basket of food waiting outside her room. And every time she wanted to throw it away. Every time she didn't, because the baby was growing, and growing children needed food, and dignity, it turned out, couldn't fill an empty stomach. What? 3 weeks later, the landlady knocked on her door. You've got a visitor, she said, her voice tight. Eliza opened the door. The landlady jerked her head toward the stairs. Downstairs, waiting room. Eliza's stomach dropped. She knew who it was before she even saw him. She found him standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the street. He turned when she entered. Mrs. Thornfield? Your Grace. He smiled faintly at the title. Still formal, I see. What do you want? To make my offer again. I already said no. I know, but I'm asking anyway. She crossed her arms. Why? Because the alternative is watching you disappear, and I won't do that. You don't even know me. I know enough. He stepped closer. I know you're stubborn. I know you're proud. I know you'd rather break than bend. And I know that if you keep going the way you are, you will break. And so will he. He nodded at the baby in her arms. Don't, she said, her voice shaking. Don't use him against me. I'm not. I'm just telling you the truth. He paused. Marry me, Eliza. Not because you want to. Not because you like me. But because it's the only way both of us survive. She looked at him. Really looked. At the lines around his eyes. The tension in his jaw. The way he stood like a man carrying something too heavy to set down. What do you get out of this? She asked. An heir, a future, a reason. And what do I get? A roof, food, safety, a name no one can take away. And my son becomes my son. Her throat tightened. Why would you do that? Because he deserves better than this. And so do you. She closed her eyes, took a breath. Opened them. If I say yes, she said slowly, it's on my terms. Name them. I won't be your puppet. I won't be silent. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. Good. I don't want you to. And if this falls apart, if you change your mind, if the world tears us apart, my son stays protected, no matter what. Agreed. She searched his face, looking for the lie, the crack, the moment where the mask would slip and she'd see what he really wanted, but all she saw was a man who looked as desperate as she felt. One more thing, she said. What? If I do this, it's not because I need you. It's because I'm choosing it. He nodded. I wouldn't have it any other way. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she said, yes. And the world shifted beneath her feet. The word spread faster than fire through dry wood. By the next morning, half the city knew that Duke Alaric Vane, the most eligible, most untouchable man in society, was going to marry a penniless widow with a bastard child. The other half didn't believe it, but by noon, when the official announcement appeared in the papers, belief didn't matter anymore. It was real. And the city lost its mind. Eliza heard about it from the landlady, who came storming up the stairs like she was personally offended by the universe. Is it true? The woman demanded, standing in the doorway with the newspaper clutched in her fist. Eliza was feeding the baby, her back to the door. She didn't turn around. Is what true? Don't play coy with me. This. The landlady shook the paper. It says here you're marrying the Duke. It does. So it's true? Yes. The landlady let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. You've got to be joking. I'm not. But how? Why? What did you... She stopped herself, her eyes narrowing. What did you do to him? Eliza finally turned, her expression flat. I didn't do anything. He asked. I said yes. Just like that? Just like that. The landlady stared at her, mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then she shook her head and backed out of the room, muttering something that sounded like unnatural and shameful, and the world's gone mad. Eliza closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. It's done. No going back now. She looked down at the baby in her arms. He blinked up at her, his tiny fist wrapped around her finger. We're going to be fine, she whispered. I promise. She wished she believed it. Assisi. The carriage came for her that afternoon. Not a modest one, not something discreet. A full Duke's carriage, black lacquer, gold trim, horses that looked like they ate better than most people. The driver knocked on her door, handed her a letter, and stood there waiting while she read it. Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. My estate. Bring everything you own. A.V. She almost laughed. Everything she owned fit in one canvas bag. The driver didn't seem surprised when she came down the stairs with nothing but the bag slung over her shoulder and the baby wrapped in her shawl. He opened the carriage door, helped her inside, and shut it without a word. As they pulled away from the boarding house, Eliza looked back. A few faces watched from the windows, pale, suspicious, resentful. She met their eyes and didn't look away. Let them watch. The carriage turned the corner and the boarding house disappeared. Out. The Vane estate sat on the edge of the city, surrounded by walls and iron gates, and enough land to make you forget there was a world outside it. Eliza had never seen anything like it. The main house was massive, 3 stories, stone and glass, with columns that looked like they were holding up the sky. The gardens stretched out in every direction, perfectly trimmed, perfectly still. It didn't look real. It looked like a painting. The carriage stopped in front of the main entrance. The driver opened the door, and Eliza stepped out, her boots crunching on the gravel. A woman was waiting at the top of the stairs, middle-aged, stern-faced, wearing a black dress that looked like it had been ironed into submission. Mrs. Thornfield, the woman said. Not a question, a statement. Yes. I'm Mrs. Halloway, the housekeeper. His Grace is expecting you. Eliza nodded, shifting the baby in her arms. Mrs. Halloway's eyes flicked to him, her expression unreadable. Follow me. Inside, the house was even more overwhelming. High ceilings, marble floors, chandeliers that sparkled like frozen stars. Everything was polished, pristine, untouchable. Eliza felt like she was walking through a museum. Mrs. Halloway led her through a series of hallways, each one more elaborate than the last, until they reached a set of double doors. She knocked once, then pushed them open. Mrs. Thornfield, Your Grace. Alaric was standing by the window, hands behind his back, staring out at the gardens. He turned when they entered, his expression calm but tired. Thank you, Mrs. Halloway. That will be all. The housekeeper hesitated, her lips thinning. Then she nodded and left, closing the doors behind her. Alaric crossed the room, stopping a few feet away. He looked at Eliza, then at the baby, then back at Eliza. You came. I said I would. I know, but I wasn't sure you'd mean it. She met his eyes. I don't say things I don't mean. He nodded slowly. Good. Neither do I. There was a pause. Awkward, heavy, full of things neither of them knew how to say. This is your home now, he said finally. You can go anywhere, do anything. Mrs. Halloway will show you around. If you need anything, I need to know what happens next. He blinked. What do you mean? I mean, what's the plan? When's the wedding? What do I tell people? What do you tell people? I've already told them. The announcement went out this morning. I know, I saw the paper. Then you know what people are saying. I can guess. His mouth twitched. It's not kind. I didn't expect it to be. He studied her for a moment, something almost like admiration flickering in his eyes. You're tougher than you look. I have to be. Yes. He turned, walking back to the window. The wedding is in 3 days. Small ceremony, just us, a magistrate, and a few witnesses. No fanfare. Why so fast? Because the longer we wait, the more time people have to stop it. She frowned. Who would stop it? My cousin. The church. Half the aristocracy. He glanced over his shoulder. People don't like it when the rules change. And this, us, is a rule change. So you're rushing it? Yes. And after? After we play the part. You're the Duchess. I'm the Duke. We attend events, host dinners, smile when we're supposed to, and slowly people forget why they were angry in the first place. And if they don't forget, then we make them. She didn't know if he was serious or not. His tone gave nothing away. What about him? She asked, nodding at the baby. Alaric's expression softened, just a little. He's my son now. Legally, officially, publicly. No one can touch him. And if someone tries, they won't. How do you know? Because I won't let them. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this man, this stranger, could actually protect them. But trust wasn't something she had in surplus anymore. I need to see it in writing, she said. He raised an eyebrow. What? The agreement, his legitimacy, his inheritance. I need to see it in writing before the wedding. For a moment she thought he'd be offended, but instead he smiled. Smart, he said. I'll have my solicitor draw it up tonight. You'll have it by morning. Thank you. He nodded. Then he walked to the door, opened it, and called for Mrs. Halloway. The housekeeper appeared almost instantly, like she'd been waiting just outside. Show Mrs. Thornfield to her rooms, Alaric said, and make sure she has everything she needs. Mrs. Halloway's expression didn't change, but Eliza could feel the judgment radiating off her like heat. Of course, Your Grace. Alaric looked at Eliza one more time. If you need anything, let me know. I will. He left, and Eliza was alone with the housekeeper and a house full of people who already hated her. Her rooms were on the second floor overlooking the gardens. 3 rooms, bedroom, sitting room, and a smaller room that Mrs. Halloway suggested could be used as a nursery. They were beautiful, luxurious, suffocating. Dinner's at 7, Mrs. Halloway said, standing in the doorway. You'll dine with His Grace in the main hall. Just the 2 of us? Yes. Eliza nodded. Thank you. Mrs. Halloway didn't move, just stood there, her eyes cold and assessing. May I speak plainly, Mrs. Thornfield? Eliza's stomach tightened. Go ahead. I've worked for this family for 20 years. I've seen His Grace through loss, through scandal, through more than you can imagine. And in all that time, I've never seen him make a decision this reckless. Is that your opinion, or his? It's fact. Mrs. Halloway stepped closer, her voice dropping. You don't belong here. You're not one of us. And no matter how much money he throws at you, no matter what title you wear, that won't change. Eliza felt the heat rise in her chest. Are you finished? No. I want you to understand something. This house, this family, this world, it doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. And if you think marrying a duke will protect you from what people say, you're a fool. Eliza set the baby down gently in the bassinet by the window. Then she turned, meeting Mrs. Halloway's gaze head on. You're right, she said quietly. I don't belong here. I'm not one of you. And I don't care. Mrs. Halloway's eyes narrowed. I'm not here because I want to be, Eliza continued. I'm here because I have to be. And if that offends you, if that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine. I'm not finished. Eliza took a step forward. I don't know what you think I am. Gold digger, opportunist, whore, pick your favorite. But here's what I am. I'm a mother, and I will do whatever it takes to keep my sons safe. If that means marrying a duke, so be it. If that means smiling at people who hate me, fine. And if that means putting up with people like you who think I'm beneath them, then I'll do that too. Mrs. Halloway's face had gone pale. But don't mistake survival for weakness, Eliza said, because I didn't get this far by being soft. She turned back to the bassinet, her hands shaking. Dinner's at 7, you said? Yes, Mrs. Halloway said, her voice tight. Then I'll see you at 7? Mrs. Halloway stood there for another moment, her mouth pressed into a thin line. Then she turned and left, closing the door a little harder than necessary. Eliza exhaled, her legs suddenly weak. She sat down on the edge of the bed and put her head in her hands. What have I done? Dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as she'd expected. The dining hall was enormous. Long table, high ceiling, enough silverware to make her head spin. Alaric sat at one end, Eliza at the other, with about 10 feet of polished wood between them. They ate in silence for the first few minutes. Then Alaric set down his fork and said, Mrs. Halloway tells me you two had words. Eliza looked up. She told you that? She didn't have to. I could hear it in the way she slammed the door. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. I wasn't trying to make enemies. No, but you did anyway. He leaned back in his chair. What did she say? That I don't belong here. Do you? No. He tilted his head. Then why are you here? You know why. Say it anyway. She set down her own fork, meeting his eyes. Because I'm tired of losing, and this is the only way I don't. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. They went back to eating, but after a moment, Alaric said, You'll have enemies here, not just Mrs. Halloway. Everyone. I know. It won't be easy. I didn't think it would be, and you're still willing to go through with it. Yes. He studied her, his expression unreadable. Why? Because I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. No, she said quietly. They don't. He didn't argue, just picked up his glass and took a long drink. After dinner, she went back to her rooms and found a document waiting for her on the desk. Thick, official, stamped with the Duke's seal. She read it twice, then a third time, making sure every word was what he'd promised. It was. Her son, legally recognized as Alaric's heir, protected, provided for, untouchable. She folded the document carefully and put it in her bag. Then she sat down and cried for the first time in weeks. The wedding was exactly as Alaric had described, small, quiet, efficient. They stood in the estate's chapel, just the two of them, the magistrate, and two witnesses Eliza didn't recognize. The ceremony lasted less than 10 minutes. No music, no flowers, no pretense. When the magistrate asked if she took Alaric as her husband, she said, I do, and meant it exactly as much as she needed to. When he asked Alaric the same, Alaric said, I do, without hesitation. And that was it. She was a duchess. The magistrate closed his book. You may kiss the bride. Alaric looked at her. Eliza looked back. Neither of them moved. The magistrate cleared his throat. It's customary? We're aware, Alaric said. He leaned in, pressed a brief, dry kiss to Eliza's cheek, and stepped back. The magistrate looked uncomfortable. Well, congratulations. They signed the papers. The witnesses left. And Eliza stood there in a borrowed dress, holding a marriage certificate, wondering what she'd just done. Alaric touched her elbow lightly. Are you all right? I don't know. That's honest. It's all I have. He nodded. Come on, there's something I need to show you. He led her out of the chapel and across the grounds to a smaller building she hadn't noticed before. It was old, ivy-covered, with tall windows and a heavy wooden door. What is this? She asked. The library? He opened the door and stepped inside. Eliza followed. The room was full of books, shelves from floor to ceiling, packed tight, the smell of paper and leather and age. A fire burned in the hearth, and there were chairs scattered around, worn and comfortable. This is where I spend most of my time, Alaric said. No one else comes here. It's quiet. Eliza walked slowly through the room, trailing her fingers along the spines of the books. Why are you showing me this? Because it's yours now, too. She turned to look at him. What? Everything here is yours. The house, the grounds, the library. You're the Duchess. That means something. It means I'm your wife. It means you're an equal partner in this estate. He crossed his arms. I meant what I said. I'm not looking for someone to obey me. I'm looking for someone to stand beside me. She didn't know what to say. He walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you didn't choose this life. But you're in it now, and I need you to understand I'm not your enemy. Then what are you? Your ally, if you'll let me be. She studied him, the tension in his shoulders, the weariness in his voice. He looked like a man who'd been fighting for a long time. Why do you need an heir so badly? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Because I'm dying. Her breath caught. What? Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. He turned to face her. I have a condition. The doctors don't know what it is, but it's progressive. In 5 years, maybe 10, I'll be gone. Eliza felt the room tilt. And you didn't think to mention this before? Would it have changed your answer? She stopped. Would it have? She didn't know. I'm not asking for pity, he said. I'm telling you the truth. I need an heir because when I'm gone, someone has to carry this forward. Someone has to make sure it means something. And you think my son can do that? I think he has a better chance than anyone else. She shook her head, trying to process it. This is insane. Probably. You should have told me. I know. Do you? Her voice was rising now, anger cutting through the shock. Do you have any idea what you've done? I agreed to marry you because I thought it was just politics, just survival. But it's still survival, he said quietly. Mine and yours, just on different timelines. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to walk out and never come back. But she didn't, because he was right. It was still survival, and she was still trapped. I need air, she said. She turned and walked out of the library, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Behind her, Alaric didn't follow. She found herself in the gardens, walking the gravel paths between the hedges. The sky was gray, the air cold, but she didn't care. She just needed to move. He's dying. He's dying, and he didn't tell me. What else hasn't he told me? She stopped by a fountain, staring at her reflection in the water. The face looking back at her was a stranger's, pale, sharp, harder than it used to be. Who am I now? Footsteps on the gravel. She turned. It wasn't Alaric. It was a man she didn't recognize, tall, well-dressed, with blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Duchess Vane, he said, giving a shallow bow. What a pleasure. Eliza frowned. Do I know you? Not yet. But you will. He extended a hand. Edmund Vane, Alaric's cousin. She didn't take his hand. What do you want? His smile widened. Just to introduce myself and to offer my congratulations. It's not every day a woman of your background marries into the family. My background? Widow, penniless, scandalous. He tilted his head. But I suppose none of that matters now, does it? You've got the title, the estate, the Duke himself. Is there a point to this? Just a friendly warning. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Alaric may think he can change the rules, but he can't. This world doesn't forgive people like you, and when he's gone, and he will be gone, you'll have nothing. No protection, no power, just a bastard child and a name no one respects. Eliza felt her hands curl into fists. Get away from me! Or what? You'll tell Alaric? He laughed. Go ahead. He can't do anything. He's dying. And when he's dead, I inherit everything. Not if my son is his heir. Edmund's smile vanished. That won't last. It's already done. Legal and binding. Laws can be challenged. Then challenge them. Oh, I will. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. Enjoy it while it lasts, Duchess. Because it won't. He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the distance. Eliza stood there, shaking, her breath coming in short bursts. This is only the beginning. She didn't tell Alaric about Edmund, not right away. She went back to her rooms, checked on the baby, still sleeping, still perfect, and sat by the window until the sun started to set. Her mind kept circling back to Edmund's words, his smile, the way he'd said bastard child like it was a weapon. Laws can be challenged. She knew that. She'd always known that. But hearing it out loud, from someone who actually wanted to do it, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. When the knock came at her door, she almost didn't answer. Eliza, Alaric's voice muffled through the wood. May I come in? She stood, smoothed her dress, and opened the door. He looked tired, more tired than she'd seen him. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his shoulders sagging slightly under the weight of whatever he'd been doing all day. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because you've been up here for 3 hours." She crossed her arms. "I needed time to think." "About what I told you?" "Among other things." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I should have told you sooner, about the illness." "I know that." "Yes, you should have." "I'm sorry." She studied his face, looking for insincerity. She didn't find any. "How long have you known?" she asked. 2 years, maybe more. He walked to the window, staring out at the darkening gardens. It started small. Headaches, dizziness. "I thought it was stress. Then it got worse." "And the doctors?" "They've tried everything, treatments, medicines, specialists from as far as Vienna. Nothing works. It's degenerative, incurable." He paused. "I have time, but not much." Eliza sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "Why didn't you just adopt? Find an orphan. Give him your name. It would have been easier than this." "Because adopted heirs can be contested. Blood ties, even fabricated ones, are harder to challenge." "So my son is a fabrication." "No, he's real. His legitimacy is real. The law recognizes him as mine now. That's not fabrication. That's fact. A fact you manufactured." "Yes." He turned to face her. "But it's still a fact." She looked at him, this man who'd upended her entire life, and felt something strange stir in her chest. Not affection, not trust, but maybe understanding. "Your cousin came to see me today," she said. Alaric's expression darkened. "Edmund?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "That when you're gone, he'll take everything. That my son's legitimacy won't matter. That I'm wasting my time." Alaric's jaw clenched. "He's wrong." "Is he?" "Yes." He crossed the room, stopping in front of her. "Edmund has no claim to this estate as long as my heir is legitimate. And your son is legitimate, legally, publicly, irrevocably. But he can challenge it. He can try. He'll fail." "How do you know?" "Because I've spent 2 years making sure of it. Every document, every contract, every legal safeguard. I've built this so it can't be torn down. Edmund can scream all he wants. It won't change anything." Eliza wanted to believe him, but belief required trust, and trust required proof. "Show me," she said. "What?" "Show me the safeguards, the documents, everything. If this is supposed to protect my son, I want to see it." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Tomorrow. I'll show you everything." So, the next morning, Alaric took her to his study. A room on the 3rd floor lined with ledgers and files and papers stacked in neat, obsessive rows. He pulled out a leather-bound folder and set it on the desk. "This is everything," he said. "Birth records, marriage certificates, inheritance documents, every piece of legal proof that makes your son my heir." Eliza opened the folder and started reading. The language was dense, full of legal jargon she didn't fully understand, but the meaning was clear enough. Her son, listed here as Henry Vane, was recognized as Alaric's legitimate child, entitled to the full inheritance upon Alaric's death. "Henry," she said softly, "you never told me his name. I had to choose one for the records." "It's fine." She turned the page. "What's this?" "A secondary provision. If Edmund or anyone else challenges the inheritance, the estate goes into a trust managed by a board of neutral arbiters until the matter is resolved. It can't be seized. It can't be sold. It's locked. And if they win the challenge, they won't. But if they do—" He hesitated. "Then the estate is divided. Half to Edmund, half to Henry. But even in that scenario, your son is protected." Eliza closed the folder, her mind spinning. "You've thought of everything." "I've tried." "Why?" He frowned. "What do you mean? Why go to all this trouble? Why not just let Edmund have it? Let the estate die with you. Walk away." "Because I can't." His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. "This estate, this legacy. It's all I have. It's the only thing I've built that matters, and I won't let it fall into the hands of someone who'll destroy it. Edmund would destroy it. He'd sell it piece by piece and drink the profits. Yes, she believed him. She could see it in Edmund's eyes yesterday. The hunger, the resentment, the entitlement. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Be ready. Edmund won't stop at words. He'll push. He'll test. And when he does, you need to stand firm." "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a duchess. Neither did I when I became a duke." He smiled faintly. "You'll learn, just like I did." She looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion, the determination, the quiet fear he was trying to hide. "You're scared," she said. "Yes. Of dying. Of failing." He turned away, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "I've spent my entire life trying to build something that lasts. And if I die without securing it, it's all for nothing." "It's not for nothing, isn't it?" "No." She stood, crossing to him. "You've given my son a future. That's not nothing." He looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You're kinder than I expected." "Don't mistake practicality for kindness." He almost smiled. "Fair enough." The first dinner party came 2 weeks later. Alaric called it a small gathering, but when Eliza walked into the ballroom and saw 50 people milling around with champagne glasses and judgmental stares, she realized his definition of small was different from hers. She wore a dress Mrs. Halloway had picked out, dark green silk, high-necked, expensive. It fit perfectly, which somehow made her more uncomfortable. She felt like she was wearing a costume. Alaric appeared at her side, offering his arm. "Ready?" "No." "Good. Neither am I." He led her into the room. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned. Whispers started. Eliza kept her chin up and her expression neutral. A woman in a blue gown approached, older, regal, with a necklace that probably cost more than Eliza's entire former life. "Your Grace," the woman said, nodding to Alaric. Then, with considerably less warmth, "Duchess." "Lady Pembroke," Alaric said. "May I introduce my wife, Eliza?" Lady Pembroke's smile was thin. "How unexpected." "We'd heard the rumors, of course, but seeing it in person is quite another thing." "Is it?" Eliza said. "Oh, yes. A widow from the streets marrying a duke. It's very modern." Alaric's grip on Eliza's arm tightened slightly. "Eliza is from a perfectly respectable background." "Of course." Lady Pembroke's eyes glittered. "And the child? Is he here?" "He's upstairs," Eliza said. "Asleep." "How sweet. And how fortunate for him to have such a generous stepfather." The word stepfather hung in the air like a slap. Eliza felt her jaw tighten. "Henry is Alaric's son, legally and in every way that matters." Lady Pembroke's eyebrows rose. "Oh, I didn't mean to imply otherwise. Just that it's quite remarkable how quickly these arrangements can be made." "Lady Pembroke," Alaric said, his voice cool, "if you'll excuse us." He steered Eliza away before she could respond. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't engage. That's what she wants." "She called my son a bastard." "She implied it. There's a difference." "Not to me." He stopped, turning to face her. "I know. But if you react, you give her ammunition. She'll twist it, spread it, use it against you. The only way to win is to not play." "That's easy for you to say." "No, it's not." His eyes were hard. "But it's necessary." She wanted to argue, wanted to storm back over to Lady Pembroke and tell her exactly what she thought. But Alaric was right. In this world, restraint was power. So she swallowed her anger and smiled. The rest of the evening was a blur of introductions, polite lies, and thinly veiled insults. By the time the last guest left, Eliza's face hurt from smiling, and her feet ached from standing. She found Alaric in the library, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring into the fire. "That was awful," she said. "Yes." "Does it get easier?" "No, you just get better at pretending." She sat down in the chair across from him. "They hate me." "They hate change. You're just the easiest target. That's comforting." "It wasn't meant to be." He took a drink. "But you did well. Better than I expected. Lady Pembroke called my son a bastard, and you didn't throw your wine in her face. That's progress." Despite everything, Eliza almost laughed. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Then Alaric said, "Edmund was here tonight." Eliza looked up sharply. "I didn't see him." He stayed in the background, watching. Alaric's expression was grim. "He's planning something." "What?" "I don't know yet, but he's too quiet. That's never a good sign." "What do we do?" "We wait, and we prepare." "For what?" "For whatever he throws at us." The attack came 3 days later. Not a physical attack, a legal one. Alaric's solicitor arrived at the estate in the middle of the afternoon, his face pale and his hands shaking. "Your Grace," he said, barely catching his breath. "We have a problem." Alaric set down his pen. "What kind of problem?" "Edmund has filed a formal challenge to Henry's legitimacy." The room went cold. "On what grounds?" Eliza demanded. "Fraud. He's claiming that Henry isn't your biological son, that you fabricated the birth records and coerced his Grace into marriage under false pretenses." Eliza felt the floor drop out from under her. "That's insane." "It doesn't matter if it's true," the solicitor said. "It matters if he can prove it, or even cast enough doubt." "He can't prove it," Alaric said, "because it's not true. But the birth records are incomplete. There's no attending physician listed, no hospital. Edmund is arguing that the lack of documentation suggests forgery." Eliza's hands clenched into fists. "I gave birth in my apartment, alone. There was no doctor because I couldn't afford one. Then we'll need witnesses, someone who can confirm the birth. There aren't any." The solicitor's face fell. Alaric stood, pacing. "This is a stall tactic. He's trying to tie us up in court, drain resources, create doubt. We fight it. Fighting it could take months, years. Then it takes years. And in the meantime," the solicitor said carefully, "the inheritance is frozen. The estate is in limbo." "Fine. Your Grace, if this drags out and if your health declines before it's resolved, I'm not dead yet." "But," "I said I'm not dead yet." Alaric's voice was sharp, final. "We fight. Do whatever it takes. Hire more lawyers. Call in favors. I don't care. Edmund doesn't get to win." The solicitor nodded, looking miserable. "I'll begin immediately." He left. Eliza sat down, her mind reeling. "This is my fault." "No, it's Edmund's. If I'd had better records." "You were alone and poor. You did what you had to do. This isn't on you." "But it affects my son." "Our son," Alaric corrected. "And yes, it does. But we'll handle it." "How?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's one way to shut this down completely." "What?" He met her eyes. "A public declaration. At the next major event, the spring gala in 2 weeks, I announce Henry as my heir in front of everyone. Not just on paper, out loud, publicly, irrevocably. Won't that just make Edmund angrier? Probably, but it'll also make it harder for him to challenge. If I acknowledge Henry in front of half the aristocracy, it becomes a matter of my word, and my word still carries weight. And if it doesn't work, then we keep fighting." Eliza looked at him, this dying man who'd tied his fate to hers, who was fighting a battle he might not live to see the end of. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I told you, I need an heir." "No. Why are you fighting this hard? You could walk away. Let Edmund have it. End the fight. Because walking away means he wins, and I won't let that happen. Even if it kills you? Especially if it kills me." She didn't know whether to admire him or pity him. Maybe both. The spring gala was the event of the season. Every important family in the city would be there. Aristocrats, politicians, merchants, everyone who mattered and everyone who pretended to. Eliza spent the days leading up to it in a haze of preparation. Dress fittings, etiquette lessons from Mrs. Halloway, who still looked at her like she was dirt, but had apparently decided that if Eliza was going to embarrass the family, she'd at least do it correctly. Practice conversations with Alaric, who coached her through the minefield of names and titles and petty grudges. "Lord Ashford is an ally," Alaric said, pointing to a name on the list. "But his wife hates me because I outbid her at an auction 5 years ago. Be polite to both, but don't expect warmth." "Noted." Lady Winters is neutral but influential. If you can win her over, others will follow. And Edmund? Alaric's expression hardened. Ignore him. Don't engage, don't react, don't acknowledge him unless you absolutely have to. What if he causes a scene? Then I handle it. The night of the gala, Eliza stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress was midnight blue, fitted, elegant. Her hair was pinned up, her face carefully made up. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a fraud. Alaric knocked and entered without waiting for an answer. You look... He stopped, his eyes widening slightly. What? Nothing. You look fine. Fine? Good. You look good. She raised an eyebrow. Smooth. I'm not good at compliments. I noticed. He almost smiled. Then his expression grew serious. Tonight is important. Are you ready? No? Good. That makes two of us. The ballroom was breathtaking. Chandeliers, flowers, music, light spilling through tall windows. Hundreds of people packed the space, all dressed in their finest, all performing for each other. Eliza walked in on Alaric's arm, and the whispers started immediately. She ignored them, kept her head high, kept walking. They made their rounds, pleasantries, small talk, lies wrapped in politeness. And then Edmund appeared. He stepped out from the crowd, a glass of champagne in hand, his smile sharp and cold. Cousin, he said, what a lovely evening. Edmund, Alaric's voice was flat. And Duchess, you look radiant. Eliza said nothing. I hear there's been some legal confusion, Edmund continued, about young Henry. Such a shame. There's no confusion, Alaric said, just noise. Noise? I'd call it legitimate concern. After all, the legitimacy of an heir is hardly a trivial matter. Henry's legitimacy is not in question. Isn't it? Edmund's smile widened. Because from where I'm standing, it looks rather shaky. No birth records, no witnesses, just your word. My word is enough. For you, perhaps, but the law requires more. Alaric stepped forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You want to challenge me, Edmund? Fine. Do it in court. But don't mistake this party for a battlefield. Edmund's eyes glittered. Oh, cousin, everything is a battlefield. He raised his glass in a mock toast and walked away. Eliza exhaled, her hand shaking. Ignore him, Alaric said. I'm trying. Try harder. The moment came an hour later. Alaric stood at the top of the grand staircase, a glass in his hand, and called for silence. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward him. Thank you all for coming, he said. His voice carried, calm and commanding. I know many of you have questions about my marriage, about my family, about the future of this estate. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. So let me be clear. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. My son, Henry Vane, is my legitimate heir. He will inherit this estate, this title, and everything that comes with it. This is not a matter of debate. It is not a matter of opinion. It is fact. The room erupted. Whispers, gasps, outrage. Alaric raised his hand and the noise died down. I understand that some of you may find this unconventional, but I don't care. This is my decision, my legacy, and no one has the right to challenge it. He looked directly at Edmund. Anyone who tries will fail. Then he descended the stairs, took Eliza's hand, and led her onto the dance floor. The orchestra started playing, and as they danced, the room watched in stunned silence. Eliza looked up at Alaric, her heart pounding. You just declared war. Yes. Was that smart? Probably not. But it was necessary. The music swelled, and for a moment, just one moment, Eliza felt something close to hope. Then she saw Edmund, standing at the edge of the room, watching them. His expression calm, cold, and utterly certain. And she knew. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. They left the gala early. Alaric said he was tired, but Eliza saw the way his hand trembled when he reached for his coat, saw the paleness in his face, the tightness around his eyes. The illness was getting worse. They rode back to the estate in silence. When they arrived, Alaric went straight to his study without a word. Eliza checked on Henry, still asleep, still safe, and then went to her rooms. She couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Edmund's face, about the challenge, about the fact that everything hinged on documents and words and legal tricks that could be undone with enough money and determination. Around midnight, she heard a crash. She bolted upright, her heart racing. Another crash from downstairs. She grabbed the knife she kept under her pillow and ran. When she reached the study, the door was open. Alaric was on the floor, papers scattered around him, his face ashen. "Alaric!" She dropped to her knees beside him. He was conscious, but barely, his breathing shallow and labored. "I'm fine," he managed. "You're not fine, I'm fine." He tried to sit up and failed. She grabbed his arm, helping him. "What happened?" "Dizzy spell. It's nothing." "It's not nothing." "Eliza, stop lying to me." Her voice cracked. "Just stop." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. "I don't have as much time as I thought," he said quietly. Her chest tightened. "How long?" "Months. Maybe less." "You said years." "I was wrong." She felt the world tilt. "We need to call a doctor." "There's no point." "There's always a point." "Not this time." She stared at him, this man who'd saved her, who'd given her son a future, who was dying right in front of her. And she realized something. She cared. Not love, not yet. Maybe not ever. But she cared. "Then we fight harder," she said. "Eliza, no, we fight harder. We finish this. We make sure Henry is protected, and we don't stop until it's done." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right." She helped him to his feet, and as they stood there, surrounded by scattered papers and fading light, Eliza made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let Edmund win. She wouldn't let Alaric's death be for nothing. And she would protect her son, no matter what it cost. The door to the study creaked. They both turned. Edmund stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said softly, "isn't this touching?" Eliza's hand went to the knife in her pocket, and the room went very, very still. Edmund stood in this doorway, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said softly, "isn't this touching?" Eliza's hand went to the knife in her pocket, and the room went very, very still. Alaric straightened, his hand gripping the edge of the desk for support. His face was pale, his breathing still uneven, but his voice was steady. "Get out, Edmund." Edmund didn't move. He stepped further into the room, his eyes scanning the scattered papers on the floor, the overturned chair, Alaric's obvious weakness. "You don't look well, cousin," Edmund said. "Should I call a doctor?" "I said get out." "I heard you. I'm choosing to ignore you." Edmund picked up one of the fallen papers, glancing at it. "Legal documents. How industrious. Still trying to lock me out, I see." "There's nothing to lock you out of. You have no claim. Yet." Edmund set the paper down carefully. "But time has a way of changing things, doesn't it? Especially when time is running out." Eliza stepped forward, putting herself between Edmund and Alaric. "Leave now." Edmund's eyes flicked to her, amused. "Or what? You'll stab me with that little knife you're clutching in your pocket? Please, we both know you don't have the stomach for it. Try me." He smiled, tempting but unnecessary. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to offer a solution." "We don't want your solutions," Alaric said. "You might, when you hear it." Edmund walked to the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "The legal challenge is going to drag on. Months, maybe years. And frankly, cousin, you don't have months. You barely have weeks." "I'll last long enough." "Will you?" Edmund turned, his expression almost pitying. "You can barely stand. You're deteriorating faster than anyone expected. And when you die, and you will die, this whole charade collapses. Henry is legitimate. The documents can be challenged, are being challenged. And without you here to defend them, they're just paper." He paused. "But there's another way." Alaric's jaw tightened. "I'm listening." "Drop the challenge. Acknowledge that Henry's claim is questionable, and I'll make you a deal. The estate gets split. Half to your so-called heir. Half to me." Everyone gets something. No one fights. Clean. Simple. Absolutely not. Why? Because of pride? Alaric, you're dying. Your legacy is already crumbling. At least this way you salvage something. Henry gets everything or Edmund gets nothing. Those are the only options. Edmund sighed. You're being unreasonable. And you're being a vulture. I'm being practical. Edmund's voice hardened. You married a woman off the streets, claimed her bastard as your own, and now you're pretending it's all legitimate. It's not, and everyone knows it. The only reason no one said it out loud is because they're too polite. But I'm not polite, cousin. I'm honest. You're a liar. Am I? Then prove it. Show me the birth certificate. Show me the hospital records. Show me one single piece of evidence that this child is who you say he is. Eliza's hand tightened around the knife. He's my son. That's all the evidence you need. Your word means nothing. Then what does? Edmund smiled. The truth. Alaric moved toward him, his steps unsteady, but his intent clear. Get out. Edmund raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine. I'll go. But think about my offer, cousin, because when you're gone, she'll have nothing. No power, no protection, just a title no one respects and a child no one believes in. Is that really the legacy you want to leave? He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. Tick-tock, Alaric. Time's running out. Then he left. The silence that followed was suffocating. Alaric slumped into the chair, his head in his hands. Eliza stood frozen, her heart pounding, her mind racing. He's right, Alaric said quietly. No, he's not. About the time. About my health. He's right. Then we work faster. He looked up at her, his eyes hollow. There's no working faster. The challenge is filed. The courts move at their own pace, and I don't have the strength to fight him the way I used to. Then I'll fight him. You? Yes. Me. She crossed to him, crouching down so they were eye level. You've been carrying this alone. You don't have to anymore. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. I'm saying that if you can't fight, then I will. I'll go to the courts. I'll face Edmund. I'll do whatever it takes. Eliza, I'm not asking for permission. Her voice was fierce now, unyielding. You gave my son a future. Now I'm going to make sure he keeps it. Alaric stared at her, something unreadable flickering in his expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right. Eat. The next morning, Eliza went to see the solicitor. His office was small, cramped, filled with stacks of papers and the smell of old leather. He looked up when she walked in, his expression wary. Duchess, he said, rising. I wasn't expecting you. I need to understand the challenge, she said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. All of it, every detail. He hesitated. His Grace is usually the one. His Grace is too ill to be here, so you're dealing with me. The solicitor blinked. Then he nodded and pulled out a thick file. Edmund's claim is based on 3 points, he said, opening the file. First, the lack of documented proof of Henry's birth. Second, the speed and secrecy of your marriage, which he argues suggests coercion or fraud. Third, the absence of any genetic verification. Genetic verification? He's demanding a physical examination by a neutral doctor to determine if Henry could plausibly be his Grace's biological child. Eliza felt her stomach drop. That's insane. Alaric and we never... I know. But Edmund is arguing that the marriage was consummated and that if it wasn't, then Henry's claim is fraudulent by default. So either I admit we didn't consummate the marriage, which makes Henry illegitimate, or I lie and say we did, which opens the door to a medical examination that will prove otherwise. Precisely. She leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. There has to be a way around this. There is. If we can prove that Henry was born before the marriage and that his Grace acknowledged him as his own regardless, the question of consummation becomes irrelevant. But we don't have proof of when he was born. Then we need to find someone who was there. A neighbor. A midwife. Anyone. Eliza thought back to the day Henry was born. The cramped apartment, the blood, the pain, the silence. She'd been alone, completely alone. There was no one, she said quietly. The solicitor's face fell. Then we have a problem. She didn't tell Alaric about the solicitor's assessment. He was already deteriorating, spending more time in bed, eating less, sleeping fitfully. The last thing he needed was more bad news. Instead, she went to the one person who might have answers, Mrs. Halloway. She found the housekeeper in the kitchens, overseeing the preparation of dinner. Mrs. Halloway looked up when Eliza entered, her expression cold. "Duchess, I need to talk to you. I'm busy." "It's important." Mrs. Halloway sighed, set down the spoon she was holding, and gestured to the hallway. They stepped outside, away from the kitchen staff. "What is it?" Mrs. Halloway asked. "Edmund is challenging Henry's legitimacy. He's demanding proof that I gave birth to him, witnesses, documentation, things I don't have." "And you're telling me this because?" "Because you've been here for 20 years. You know everyone in this city. If there's anyone who might remember, anyone who might have seen something, it would be you." Mrs. Halloway crossed her arms. "I wasn't there when you gave birth." "I know, but you know people, neighbors, servants, someone who might have been near my apartment, who might have heard something." "Why would I help you?" Eliza met her gaze. "Because if Edmund wins, he'll destroy this estate. He'll sell it piece by piece, and everything Alaric built will be gone. You said it yourself, you've worked for this family for 20 years. Do you really want to see it fall apart?" Mrs. Halloway's jaw tightened. She looked away, her hands clenching into fists. "There was a woman," she said finally. "A midwife. She worked in the lower districts, delivered babies for women who couldn't afford doctors. Do you know her name?" Margaret Cole. She's old now, probably doesn't work anymore, but she might remember." "Where can I find her?" Mrs. Halloway gave her an address, a street in the poorest part of the city, the kind of place Eliza used to call home. "Thank you," Eliza said. Mrs. Halloway didn't respond, just turned and walked back into the kitchen. Eliza went alone. She didn't tell Alaric, didn't take a carriage, didn't bring a guard. She put on her simplest dress, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and walked. The lower districts hadn't changed. Same narrow streets, same crumbling buildings, same smell of smoke and desperation. She navigated them by memory, her feet carrying her past places she'd tried to forget. The address Mrs. Halloway had given her led to a boarding house, old, sagging, one step away from collapse. Eliza knocked on the door. A woman answered, elderly, bent, with sharp eyes and gnarled hands. "What do you want?" the woman asked. "Are you Margaret Cole?" "Who's asking?" "My name is Eliza Thornfield. I need to talk to you about a birth." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "I don't do that work anymore. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if you remember. About 9 months ago. A woman giving birth in an apartment on Creole Lane, alone. No doctor. No help." Margaret stared at her for a long moment. Then her expression shifted. "You." Eliza's breath caught. "You were there?" "Not exactly, but I heard about it. Woman screaming for hours. No one went to help because no one wanted to get involved. By the time I got there, it was over. You were alive. Baby was alive. Barely." "You saw me. Saw you through the window. You were sitting on the floor holding the baby, covered in blood. I knocked, but you didn't answer, so I left." "Why didn't you help?" "Because you didn't ask." Margaret's voice was blunt. "I've delivered enough babies to know when someone wants help and when they want to be left alone. You wanted to be left alone." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. "I was scared. I know. I could see it. Would you testify? In court, to say you saw me, saw the baby." Margaret was quiet. Then she said, "What's in it for me?" Eliza hadn't expected that. I can pay you." "I don't need money. I need a roof that doesn't leak and food that doesn't make me sick." "Done. I'll make sure you're taken care of. A room at the estate, meals, whatever you need." Margaret studied her, her sharp eyes calculating. Then she nodded. "All right. I'll testify." The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Eliza spent the time preparing, going over her testimony with the solicitor, rehearsing answers to every possible question, trying to anticipate Edmund's moves. Alaric wanted to attend, but he could barely make it out of bed. The illness was ravaging him now. Fevers, seizures, moments where he didn't recognize her. The doctors came and went, their faces grim, their prognoses hopeless. "You should rest," Eliza said, sitting by his bedside the night before the hearing. I want to be there, he said, his voice weak. I know, but you can't. If I'm not there, they'll say I'm too weak to defend the claim, that I've abandoned it. Then let them say it. I'll be there. That's enough. He looked at her, his eyes glassy with fever. You're stronger than I thought. I had to be. He reached for her hand. She took it, his skin hot and dry against hers. If I don't make it, don't. Eliza, listen. If I don't make it, you need to finish this. You need to make sure Henry is protected. I will. Promise me. I promise. He nodded, his eyes drifting closed. Within moments, he was asleep. Eliza sat there, holding his hand, until the sun came up. The courtroom was packed. Eliza walked in with the solicitor at her side, her heart pounding, her hands clammy. She wore a simple dress. No jewels, no finery. She wanted to look like herself, not the Duchess everyone expected. Edmund was already there, sitting at the opposing table with his own team of lawyers. He smiled when he saw her. She didn't smile back. The judge entered, an older man, severe, with a reputation for fairness but little patience for theatrics. This is a hearing to determine the legitimacy of Henry Vane as the heir to the Vane estate, the judge said. The petitioner, Edmund Vane, has raised concerns regarding the circumstances of the child's birth and the validity of the marriage. The defense, represented by Duchess Eliza Vane, will present evidence to counter these claims. We will proceed. Edmund's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we believe the evidence will show that Henry Vane is not the biological son of Duke Alaric Vane, and that the marriage between the Duke and Duchess was entered into fraudulently for the purpose of securing an inheritance. Noted. Defense? The solicitor stood. Your Honor, we have evidence that Henry Vane was born to Duchess Eliza Vane prior to her marriage, and that Duke Alaric Vane knowingly and willingly acknowledged the child as his heir. We have a witness who can corroborate the birth. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Margaret Cole was called to the stand. She walked in slowly, her back bent, her hands shaking. But when she sat down and took the oath, her voice was clear and steady. Edmund's lawyer questioned her first. Mrs. Cole, you claim to have witnessed the birth of Henry Vane. Is that correct? I saw the aftermath, the mother and child, just after the birth. But you didn't assist in the birth itself? No. So you can't confirm that the child born that night is the same child now being claimed as the Duke's heir? Margaret's eyes narrowed. I saw a newborn baby in that woman's arms. Unless she switched babies in the 2 minutes between the birth and when I looked through the window, yes, it's the same child. A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Order! The lawyer frowned. Mrs. Cole, how can you be certain the woman you saw was Duchess Eliza Vane? Because she's sitting right there, and I remember her face. Memory can be unreliable. Not mine. The lawyer tried a few more angles, but Margaret didn't budge. She was sharp, unshakable, and completely believable. When Eliza's solicitor took over, he kept it simple. Mrs. Cole, in your professional opinion as a midwife, did the scene you witnessed appear consistent with a recent birth? Yes. Blood, exhaustion, newborn child. It was textbook. And you're willing to swear under oath that the woman you saw that night is the same woman sitting in this courtroom today? Yes. Thank you. No further questions. Margaret stepped down. Then it was Eliza's turn. She walked to the stand, her legs shaking, her mouth dry. She took the oath, her voice barely above a whisper. Edmund's lawyer stood. Duchess Vane, can you tell the court when and where Henry Vane was born? In my apartment on Creole Lane, 9 months before my marriage to Duke Vane. And who was present at the birth? No one. I was alone. Convenient. It wasn't convenient, it was terrifying. The lawyer smirked. And yet, despite being alone, you managed to deliver a healthy child with no complications? Yes. How? Because I didn't have a choice. The courtroom was silent. The lawyer paced. Duchess, your marriage to Duke Vane occurred very quickly after your husband's death. Some might say suspiciously quickly. Can you explain that? I was desperate. My son and I were starving. The Duke offered help. I accepted. So you married him for money? I married him for survival. And in exchange, you agreed to pass your child off as his heir? No, in exchange, he agreed to give my son a future. That was the deal. A deal that benefited you greatly. And him. He needed an heir. I needed protection. It was mutual. The lawyer leaned in. Did you and Duke Vane consummate the marriage? The solicitor shot to his feet. Objection. Irrelevant. Your Honor, if the marriage was not consummated, it brings into question the legitimacy of the claim. The judge frowned. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Duchess. Eliza met the lawyer's eyes. No, we did not. A gasp went through the courtroom. Edmund's lawyer smiled. So the marriage is a sham. No, it's a legal contract. Consummation is not required for legitimacy. But it does suggest that the Duke never intended this to be a real marriage. That it was simply a transaction to install your child as his heir. It was a transaction, Eliza said, her voice rising. I've never claimed otherwise, but it was a legal one. My son is Duke Vane's heir because Duke Vane chose him to be. That's not fraud, that's his right. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order! Edmund's lawyer tried to continue, but Eliza cut him off. You want to know why Duke Vane chose my son? Because he saw something in him. Something worth protecting. And whether or not we consummated the marriage, whether or not Henry is his biological child, doesn't change the fact that Duke Vane acknowledged him, publicly, legally, irrevocably. You can challenge the paperwork all you want, but you can't challenge his choice. The judge looked at her, his expression unreadable. Step down, Duchess. She did, her hands trembling, her heart racing. The judge deliberated for what felt like hours. Then he spoke. Based on the testimony provided, I find that Henry Vane was born to Duchess Eliza Vane, and that Duke Alaric Vane knowingly and willingly acknowledged the child as his heir. The legitimacy of the marriage, while unconventional, is legally sound. The challenge is dismissed. The courtroom exploded. Eliza sat frozen, unable to process what she'd just heard. They'd won. Edmund's face went white, then red. He stood, slamming his hands on the table. This is absurd. You can't... Mr. Vane, the decision is final. Unless you have new evidence, this matter is closed. Edmund's lawyer whispered something to him. Edmund shook his head, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing. Then he turned and walked out. Oh, son. Eliza made it back to the estate in a daze. She went straight to Alaric's room. He was awake, barely, his face pale and drawn. We won, she said. He smiled, a real smile. I knew you would. I couldn't have done it without Margaret, or you, or... You did it, Eliza, you. She sat down beside him, taking his hand. You need to rest. I will, soon. Alaric, I'm proud of you, he said quietly. You've become someone I didn't expect, someone stronger. I had to be. No, you chose to be. There's a difference. She didn't know what to say. He squeezed her hand. Take care of him. Take care of Henry. I will. And take care of yourself. I'll try. He closed his eyes, and within moments he was asleep again. Eliza sat there, holding his hand, until the room grew dark. When she finally stood to leave, Mrs. Halloway was waiting in the hallway. You did well today, the housekeeper said. Eliza blinked, surprised. Thank you. Mrs. Halloway nodded. Then, almost reluctantly, she added, You're not what I thought you were. What did you think I was? Weak, opportunistic, a parasite. And now? Mrs. Halloway met her eyes. Now I think you might actually survive this. It wasn't a compliment, not exactly, but it was something. And for now that was enough. It wasn't a compliment, not exactly, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. Eliza walked back to her rooms, exhaustion settling into her bones. The adrenaline from the courtroom was fading, leaving behind a hollow kind of relief. They'd won the hearing. Henry's legitimacy was secure. But Edmund wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She checked on Henry, asleep in his bassinet, his tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. She watched him for a long time, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the way his fingers curled into loose fists. Safe. For now. But for now wasn't enough. It never had been. She needed to make sure Edmund couldn't come back, couldn't challenge them again, couldn't wait in the shadows for Alaric to die and then strike when she was vulnerable. She needed to end this. The next morning, she went to see the solicitor again. He was sorting through files when she arrived, his desk even more cluttered than before. He looked up, surprised. "Duchess, I didn't expect you so soon. I need to know if Edmund can appeal." The solicitor hesitated. Technically, yes. He could file for a review, argue that new evidence has come to light, or claim procedural errors in the hearing. How long would that take? Months? Maybe a year? And in the meantime, the current ruling stands. Henry is recognized as the heir. But if Alaric dies before the appeal is resolved? The solicitor's face fell. Then it becomes more complicated. Edmund could argue that without the Duke here to defend the claim, the legitimacy should be re-examined. Eliza's jaw tightened. "So we're not done?" "I'm afraid not." She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. What would it take to make this final? No appeals, no loopholes, no way for Edmund to challenge it again? A formal decree from the Duke, signed in front of multiple witnesses, explicitly naming Henry as his sole heir and disinheriting Edmund completely. And it would need to be done while his grace is still of sound mind. He's dying. He has days, maybe weeks. Is he still of sound mind? That's a question for a doctor. Then get one. Today. The doctor came that afternoon. He was an older man, gray-haired and serious, with the kind of face that had seen too much suffering to be impressed by titles or wealth. He examined Alaric thoroughly, checking his pulse, his reflexes, his ability to respond to questions. Eliza waited outside the room, pacing. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was grim. "He's lucid," the doctor said. "Weak, but lucid. His mind is intact." For how long? Impossible to say. Hours, days, but not much longer. Eliza felt the floor shift beneath her. Can he sign legal documents? If he understands what he's signing, yes, but I'd advise doing it quickly. She nodded. "Thank you." The doctor left and Eliza went back into the room. Alaric was propped up against the pillows, his face pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were clear. "I heard," he said. "We need to do this now. The final decree. No room for Edmund to fight back." "I know. Are you strong enough?" He smiled faintly. "I'll have to be." The solicitor arrived within the hour, carrying a thick document and an ink pen. Mrs. Halloway and 2 other estate staff members were called in as witnesses. Alaric read the document slowly, his eyes scanning each line. Then he signed it, his hand shaking but his signature unmistakable. "This states that Henry Vane is my sole heir," he said, his voice hoarse, "and that Edmund Vane is hereby disinherited from any claim to the estate, the title, or any associated properties." The witnesses signed below him. The solicitor stamped the document with the official seal. "It's done," the solicitor said quietly. Alaric leaned back, exhausted. "Good." Eliza reached for his hand. He squeezed it weakly. "Now Edmund has nothing," he said. "Now Edmund has nothing," she repeated. But even as she said it, she knew Edmund wouldn't see it that way. Edmund came to the estate that night. He didn't knock, didn't announce himself, just walked in like he owned the place. Eliza was in the library when she heard the commotion, raised voices, footsteps in the hall. She set down her book and went to investigate. Edmund was standing in the entrance hall, his coat dripping rain, his face twisted with fury. Mrs. Halloway was blocking his path, her arms crossed. "You are not welcome here," the housekeeper said. "I don't care. I want to see Alaric. His grace is resting." "I don't care about that either. Move." "No." Edmund's hand shot out, grabbing Mrs. Halloway by the arm. She gasped, stumbling backward. "Let her go," Eliza said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Edmund turned, his eyes locking onto her. "You." "Me." He released Mrs. Halloway, who retreated to the side, her face pale. Edmund stepped toward Eliza, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you've won," he said. "You think that piece of paper makes you untouchable." It does. No, it makes you a target. He stopped inches from her, his voice dropping to a whisper. You've taken everything from me. My inheritance, my future, my family name. You never had it. Alaric chose someone else. He chose a bastard and a whore. Eliza's hand moved before she could think. The slap echoed through the hall. Edmund's head snapped to the side. He stood there for a moment, stunned. Then he laughed, a low, bitter sound. You're going to regret that. I doubt it. He straightened, wiping the corner of his mouth. When Alaric dies, you'll have nothing. No allies, no protection, just a crying baby and a house full of people who hate you. Then I'll manage, just like I always have. Will you? Because I've been doing some digging into your past, your late husband, the rumors about how he died. Eliza's blood ran cold. People are starting to talk, Edmund continued, about how convenient it was. A sick husband, a young widow, a sudden death. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Get out. What if I told the papers? What if I told everyone that you might have killed your first husband to get to your second? You have no proof. I don't need proof. I just need doubt. Eliza stepped closer, her voice low and deadly. If you spread that lie, I will destroy you. How? You have no power. I have more than you think. He smirked. We'll see. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the door swinging open behind him. Eliza stood there, shaking, her hands curled into fists. Mrs. Halloway approached cautiously. Are you all right? No. Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. But I will be. Tick. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by Alaric's bedside, watching him breathe, her mind spinning with Edmund's threat. What if I told everyone that you might have killed your first husband? It was a lie. A complete vicious lie. But it didn't matter. People believed what they wanted to believe. And if Edmund planted that seed, it would grow. Around midnight, Alaric woke. You're still here, he said. I'm always here, he smiled faintly. You don't have to be. Yes, I do. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What's wrong? Nothing. Eliza, she sighed. Edmund was here. He threatened to spread rumors about me, about David's death. Alaric's expression hardened. What kind of rumors? That I killed him, that I married you to cover it up. That's absurd. I know, but people will believe it anyway. Then we stop it before it starts. How? He thought for a moment. We go public, completely. No secrets, no hiding. We tell the truth, all of it. About the marriage, about Henry, about why I chose you. We take away his ammunition. That's a risk. Everything is a risk. He reached for her hand. But I'd rather face the truth than let him control the narrative. She looked at him, this dying man who'd risked everything for her, and made a decision. All right, we go public. Awesome. The interview was scheduled for the following week. A journalist from the city's most respected newspaper arrived at the estate, notebook in hand, eyes sharp with curiosity. Eliza sat across from him in the drawing room, Alaric beside her in a wheelchair. He was barely holding on now, his skin gray, his voice weak, but he'd insisted on being present. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, the journalist said. I understand this is a difficult time. It is, Eliza said, but we wanted to set the record straight. About your marriage. About everything. The journalist leaned forward. Let's start at the beginning. How did you and Duke Vane meet? Eliza told the story. All of it. The shelters that turned her away. The nights on the street. The first time Alaric had appeared in the alley, offering help. The proposal. The marriage. The legal battle. The journalist wrote furiously, his pen scratching across the page. And your son, he said. Henry. There have been questions about his legitimacy. Henry is my biological son, Eliza said. Born before my marriage to Alaric. Alaric chose to acknowledge him as his heir because he saw something in him worth protecting. Even though the child isn't his? Parenthood isn't just biology, it's choice. Alaric chose Henry. That makes him his father. The journalist looked at Alaric. Your Grace, do you have anything to add? Alaric's voice was barely a whisper, but it was steady. I married Eliza because I needed an heir. She married me because she needed protection. It was a transaction, but over time it became something more. Not love, perhaps, but partnership, respect, and that's worth more than any bloodline. The journalist scribbled faster. And the rumors about Mrs. Thornfield's first husband? Lies, Alaric said. Spread by a man who wants what he can't have. My cousin, Edmund Vane, has been trying to discredit Eliza since the day we married. He's failed every time. He'll fail again. Strong words. True words. The journalist closed his notebook. This will make quite the story. Good, Eliza said. Let people read it. Let them decide for themselves. The article came out 3 days later. It was front page. The headline read, "The Duke's Last Stand. A marriage of necessity becomes a legacy of choice." The piece was fair, balanced, and devastatingly honest. It laid out the facts: Eliza's poverty, Alaric's illness, the legal battle, Edmund's attacks. But it also told the human story. Two people, desperate and alone, finding a way to survive together. The city's reaction was immediate. Some were outraged, called it a scandal, a disgrace, an insult to tradition. But others, more than Eliza had expected, were moved. Letters started arriving at the estate, from widows who'd been turned away by shelters, from mothers who'd given birth alone, from people who'd been judged, dismissed, erased. They wrote to thank her, to tell her she'd given them hope. Eliza read every letter, and for the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Bope. Alaric died 4 days after the article was published. It was quiet, peaceful. He simply stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Eliza was with him. She'd been sitting by his bed reading aloud from one of his favorite books when she noticed the silence. She looked up, saw the stillness in his chest, and knew. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just sat there, holding his hand until the sun came up. When Mrs. Halloway found her in the morning, the housekeeper didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway, her face somber. "He's gone," Eliza said. "I know. He was a good man." "Yes, he was." Eliza finally let go of his hand, stood, straightened her dress. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you bury him, and then you keep going." Mum. The funeral was enormous. It seemed like the entire city turned out. Aristocrats, commoners, people Eliza had never met. They filled the cathedral, spilled out into the streets, stood in silence as Alaric's casket was carried past. Eliza walked behind it, Henry in her arms, her head high. She didn't wear black. She wore dark blue, the color of the dress she'd worn the night Alaric had proposed at the spring gala. People whispered, but she didn't care. At the burial, the priest said the usual words. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, words that meant nothing and everything. When it was over, people came to offer condolences. Some were genuine. Others were performative. Eliza thanked them all, her voice steady, her expression calm. Then Edmund appeared. He walked up slowly, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Duchess," he said. "Edmund, I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" He almost smiled. "Not really. But it seemed like the polite thing to say." "Then you've said it. Now leave." "Not yet." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You won this round. I'll give you that. But this isn't over." "Yes, it is." "You think that piece of paper protects you? You think people will just accept this?" "They already have. Some have. Others haven't. And I'm patient. I can wait." Eliza met his eyes. "Then wait. But know this, I'm not going anywhere, and neither is my son. You had your chance to fight. You lost. And you'll keep losing, because I'm not the scared widow you met in the gardens anymore. I'm the Duchess, and I'm not afraid of you." Edmund's smile faded. "We'll see," he said. Then he walked away. Eliza watched him go, her heart steady, her resolve unshaken. 3 months later, the estate hosted its first formal event under Eliza's leadership, a charity dinner, for women and children in need. The ballroom was full, aristocrats mingling with commoners, the wealthy sitting beside the working class. It was unconventional, radical even, and it worked. Eliza stood at the front of the room, Henry on her hip, and addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know many of you have questions about why I'm doing this, about why I'm breaking with tradition. The answer is simple. I've been where these women are. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be judged, to be told you don't matter." She paused, looking around the room. "But you do matter, every single one of you. And if this estate, this legacy, this name can be used to help people who need it, then that's what it will be used for. Not because it's expected, but because it's right." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. It was Mrs. Halloway. Others joined. And within moments, the entire room was applauding. Eliza looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who'd once dismissed her, who'd called her names, who'd doubted her. They weren't doubting anymore. Later that night, after the guests had left, Eliza stood in the library. The fire was burning low, casting long shadows across the room. She thought about everything that had brought her here. The locked doors, the cold nights, the desperate bargain with a dying duke. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been fair. But it had been hers, and she'd survived. Mrs. Halloway appeared in the doorway. "You did well tonight," the housekeeper said. "Thank you." His Grace would have been proud. Eliza smiled. "I hope so." Mrs. Halloway hesitated. Then she said, "I was wrong about you. I know. I judged you before I knew you. That wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't." Eliza turned to face her. "But I understand why you did. I was an outsider, a threat, someone who didn't belong. And now? Now I do belong. Not because anyone gave me permission, but because I earned it." Mrs. Halloway nodded. Then, for the first time, she smiled. "Yes, you did." Weeks turned into months. The estate flourished. The charity work expanded. And slowly, quietly, the city's opinion of Eliza began to shift. She wasn't the scandalous widow anymore. She was the duchess who'd defied expectations. The woman who'd turned tragedy into purpose. The mother who'd fought for her son's future and won. Edmund tried once more to challenge the inheritance, but this time the courts didn't even hear his case. The decree was ironclad. Henry's legitimacy was beyond question. Edmund disappeared after that. Some said he left the city. Others said he drunk himself into obscurity. Eliza didn't care. He was no longer her concern. On Henry's first birthday, Eliza held a small celebration at the estate. Just a few close friends. Margaret Cole, Mrs. Halloway, the solicitor, a handful of staff members who'd stood by her. They gathered in the gardens, watching Henry toddle across the grass, laughing as he chased a butterfly. Margaret sat beside Eliza on a bench, her old hands folded in her lap. "You've done well," Margaret said. "I've tried." "More than tried. You've built something, not just for him, for yourself." Eliza watched Henry stumble, catch himself, and keep going. "I didn't think I'd make it this far," she admitted. "But you did." "Yes, I did." Margaret patted her hand. "The world tried to erase you, and you refused to let it." Eliza thought about that, about the doors that had slammed in her face, the whispers, the judgment, the nights when she'd wanted to give up. And she thought about Alaric, about his final words, "Take care of him, take care of yourself." She'd done both, and she'd do it again. Every day. For as long as it took. That night, after everyone had gone, Eliza stood in the nursery watching Henry sleep. He was growing so fast. Already walking, already talking in broken, babbling sentences, already becoming his own person. She leaned down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You're safe now. You're protected. And you always will be." He stirred but didn't wake. She straightened, her hand resting on the edge of the crib. This was her legacy now, not the estate, not the title, not the wealth. Her son. Her choices. Her refusal to disappear. And as she stood there, in the quiet of the night, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief, not pride, not even happiness. Just peace. She'd survived, and she'd won. Not because the world had forgiven her, not because society had accepted her, but because she'd refused to let them define her. She'd defined herself. And that was enough. Und. Years later, when Henry was old enough to ask questions, he asked about his father. "Tell me about him," he said. Eliza sat with him in the library, the same library where Alaric had shown her the books, where he'd told her about his illness, where they'd made their final stand together. "He was a complicated man," she said. "Strong, stubborn, dying. But he chose you. When the whole world told him not to, he chose you anyway." "Why?" "Because he believed you were worth it." "Was he right?" She smiled. "I think so, but you'll have to prove it." Henry thought about that. Then he said, "What about my other father, my real one?" "He was good too, just in a different way, quieter, gentler. He loved me, even when things were hard." "Do you miss him?" "Sometimes, but missing someone doesn't mean you're stuck in the past. It just means they mattered." Henry nodded, processing. "And what about you?" he asked. "Who are you?" Eliza looked at him. This child who'd been born into nothing, who'd been given everything, who would one day carry a name that had almost destroyed her. "I'm your mother," she said, "and I'm someone who refused to give up, even when I should have." "I'm glad you didn't." "So am I." The city changed, slowly, reluctantly. But it changed. The charity work Eliza had started expanded into a foundation. Shelters opened, programs launched. Women who'd once been invisible found help, found voices, found futures. And at the center of it all was the woman they'd tried to erase, the Duchess, who'd rewritten the rules, not with force, not with anger, but with quiet, relentless refusal to disappear. Some still whispered, some still judged. But more and more people looked at her and saw something different. Not a scandal, not a mistake, but a woman who'd survived the worst the world could throw at her and built something better from the ashes. On the 10th anniversary of Alaric's death, Eliza stood at his grave. It was a simple headstone, just his name, his dates, and a single line. He chose love over legacy, and found both. She knelt, placing a single white rose on the stone. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for choosing us, for giving me a chance." The wind rustled through the trees. The city stretched out below, alive and loud and unforgiving. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She stood, brushed the dirt from her knees, and walked back toward the estate. Henry was waiting for her at the gate. 17 now, tall, confident, ready to take on the world. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," she said. And together they walked home. Not as survivors, but as victors. Not because the world had given them permission, but because they'd claimed it anyway. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They'd refused to disappear. They'd refused to break. They'd refused to be anything less than exactly who they were. And the world, slowly, grudgingly, inevitably, bent around them. Because that's what the world does. It adapts. And so did they.